Hey there. Today we're diving into one of the most seismic geopolitical earthquakes of our time. The assassination of Iran's supreme leader has just shattered 4 decades of theocratic rule and threatens to ignite total war across West Asia. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's death doesn't just end a life, it ends an era. 4 decades of absolute power gone in an instant. Alright, before we get into the details, let me quickly walk you through what this video covers. We'll examine how a political prisoner became the Middle East's most powerful man, understand the unique theocratic system he built, see how economic sanctions and nuclear diplomacy shaped his rule, analyze the crumbling axis of resistance, explore the massive power vacuum his death creates, and finally understand what this seismic shift means for India's strategic calculations in West Asia. Now let's understand each of these properly, starting from the beginning. To understand Khamenei's grip on power, we need to go back to 1953. Now, to understand this better, the 1953 coup was a joint CIA-MI6 operation that overthrew Iran's democratically elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh. The Americans and British did this because Mossadegh had nationalized Iran's oil industry, taking control away from British Petroleum, SAMA. The Shah's secret police, SAVAK, became notorious for brutal suppression. Established with CIA and Israeli Mossad assistance, it tortured thousands of political dissidents. This is where Khamenei learned to hate America. When Ayatollah Khomeini returned from exile in 1979, Khamenei quickly rose through revolutionary ranks. He survived a 1981 assassination attempt that paralyzed his right arm, becoming what his followers called a living martyr of the revolution. A quick note on this concept. Vilayat-e-Faqih, or guardianship of the jurist, is the foundational principle of Iran's political system. It grants supreme authority to a qualified Islamic jurist who acts as God's representative on earth. This makes Iran unique among modern nation-states. This brings us to an important concept. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action was the nuclear deal signed in 2015 between Iran and P5+1 countries. It limited Iran's uranium enrichment to 3.67%, well below weapons grade 90%, and allowed international inspections in exchange for sanctions relief. After Khomeini's death in 1989, senior clerics chose Khamenei as the new Rahbar despite his own admission of being not worthy. But here's where things get complicated. The system he built was unlike anything the world had seen. Khamenei established a system where religious authority supersedes democratic institutions. As supreme leader, he controlled the military and security forces, foreign policy decisions, nuclear program oversight, and approval of presidential candidates. This system survived both reformist presidents like Mohammad Khatami and hardliners like Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. When the Green Movement erupted in 2009 over alleged election fraud, Khamenei backed the hardliners and crushed the protests brutally. And it goes further. Iran's oil-rich economy struggled under Western sanctions due to its nuclear program. Despite calling America the Great Satan, Khamenei authorized nuclear talks when Hassan Rouhani became president in 2013. The 2015 nuclear agreement offered Iran's best chance to rejoin global markets. But President Trump's withdrawal in 2018 reimposed crushing sanctions, creating a vicious cycle. Economic crisis at home led to increased domestic repression, which sparked popular uprisings, which pushed Iran into regional proxy conflicts. It was a death spiral. Meanwhile, Khamenei built what he called an axis of resistance, a network of proxy militias across the region. This network served as Iran's forward defense against Israel and the United States. Let's put this in perspective with hard data. Iran's proxy network included Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, Houthis in Yemen, and various militias in Iraq and Syria. But here's the shocking reality. Israel's military campaigns in 7th October 2023 systematically dismantled this entire network, and the speed of collapse? Absolutely unprecedented. Gaza was devastated after the Hamas attack, Hezbollah was degraded in Lebanon, the Assad regime collapsed in Syria, Iranian influence dramatically weakened across the board. Raya. So what does all this mean? Khamenei's death creates an unprecedented crisis for Iran. There's no clear succession mechanism, competing clerical factions, widespread domestic unrest, and economic collapse under sanctions. Externally, Iran faces even bigger vulnerabilities. Its proxy network is weakened, it has no reliable allies, Russia is busy with Ukraine, China is reluctant to get involved, And there's escalating conflict with Israel and the United States. Iran's retaliatory strikes following the assassination signal it won't go down without a fight, but its defensive capabilities appear severely limited. The question becomes, how far will this escalate? What does this mean for India? First, our energy security is at risk. Iran supplied 10% of India's oil imports before sanctions, and there's potential disruption to Strait of Hormuz shipping routes. Regional stability concerns are massive. If this conflict escalates, we could see a refugee crisis, impact on our diaspora in Gulf countries, and major disruption to India's West Asia Balancing Act. Given this reality, what can be done? India maintains ties with both Iran and Israel, but we may face pressure to choose sides. This impacts our connectivity projects and trade routes fundamentally. India's approach must remain pragmatic, protecting our energy interests while maintaining strategic autonomy. We need alternative energy suppliers, diversified trade routes, and careful diplomatic positioning. The bigger challenge is refugee management and diaspora protection. If this conflict spreads, India must be prepared for massive evacuation operations from Gulf countries, similar to what we did during the Iraq-Kuwait crisis. Ultimately, this is about more than just Iran. Khamenei's death marks the end of an era where ideology could sustain authoritarian rule. Power without legitimacy is brittle. It can be maintained through force, but cannot be sustained indefinitely. Let's quickly recap the 5 key things to remember. Khamenei rose from political prisoner to supreme leader after the 1979 revolution. He built a unique theocratic system called Vilayat-e-Faqih and Iran. Economic sanctions and nuclear diplomacy defined his later years. His axis of resistance proxy network has largely collapsed. His death creates massive power vacuum with no clear succession plan. In geopolitics, there are no permanent enemies or permanent friends, only permanent interests. Iran's story reminds us that even the most entrenched systems can collapse when they lose connection with their people's aspirations. If this analysis helped clarify Iran's transformation and its implications for India, consider subscribing for more deep dive geopolitical content. Your support helps us create comprehensive coverage of complex international issues.